Welcome back to the Choosing Known podcast. I'm Laura Catherine, and I am glad to be back with all of you today and looking forward to diving back in where we left off. So I know last time we talked quite a bit about the idea of habit, and I'm hoping as you looked at your thoughts and how those flowed to your heart and your deciding part of who you are in the heart, that you kind of noticed that. You noticed that flow with new things, but maybe you've also gone back and explored some of the ways that you have been making decisions and how those are really habits. They are this like ingrained way of showing up. And today we're going to continue to build on that idea, the flow of habitual, what we call habitual behavior, of habits and patterns in who we are. And we're going to be looking at this slide again, and we're going to be paying attention specifically to that arrow that flows from the heart to the body. And we're looking at how does the will have an influence and an impact on our behavior, how we show up and how we act in the world. And so we're going to look at that arrow together today and explore some things there. So to help make this maybe a little bit real, let's think about for a minute, maybe a time when you were with somebody and you just kind of sensed they didn't have your best interest at heart. So maybe you're with them and even like the way they're acting on the outside, they're being nice, they're smiling, they're interacting with you in a way that the external behavior, if that was all we were focused on, it would be good. We would think it was good. We'd feel good about it. But there was another part of you that's just like, I think this person's up to something. This just doesn't feel right to me. It just doesn't, I don't feel good about this. What you were feeling in that moment was the underlying motive. You may have been sensing through the behavior that they were expressing and showing to you, you were sensing something doesn't feel right in the heart part of what's going on here. This just doesn't seem right to me. So let's just sort of think about what that felt like. And now let's go take it in maybe even to our own life. And let's think about maybe a time when we did something that we really weren't very proud of. And we just kind of go, whoa, where did that come from? And we're sort of annoyed maybe with ourselves, potentially even like disgusted with ourselves that, wow, like why did I just show up the way that I showed up? That is not how I want to be. That is not something that I'm proud of. And we've all had that happen. We've all had that happen probably many times in our life and look back and go, man, if I had a do-over, I would so do that over again. And so when we see and we understand, back to this slide again, that the behavior that we have, it might not be good behavior. I just used two examples of behavior that wasn't good. It might also be good behavior. When we see this, we recognize all of that behavior, it's coming from the heart. It's actually flowing out of that heart space. And, I, in the work that I do with clients, and I love the work that I get to do. I'm so thankful. I meet incredible people, and I love working with them and just seeing people grow. And as I say to some of my clients, it's like just incredible to have a front row seat in people's life and to see how they grow and how they transform. And, I get a chance because of that work I get to watch a lot. I get to listen a lot. I get to observe a lot, and I learn so much every week because of all the hours I just get to listen and watch and learn. And I also do that a lot in my life. You all might be almost sick of me saying like notice and be curious and observe and consider and notice again. And yet that's the work that we have to do in development and growth, because it's not just brand new things we need to learn. We also need to notice what's going on with us so we can even identify what are some of the brand new things I need to learn. So anyway, I digress. Let me come back to the point here. Sometimes in the line of work that I'm in, we can be inclined, my clients, me included, we can be inclined when we don't like how we're showing up and we want to be better leaders and we want to be maybe we'll put it into more of a normal real life situation. I just want to be a better person. And we can be inclined to really focus on behavior. And we can think, well, let me change my behavior. Let me change, if we look back here at our slide, let me change how I'm acting. Let me change how I show up. And we can go try to do a lot of work on the behavior. And, that's where sometimes these funny old sayings come from, like, it's just lipstick on a pig. You're just putting lipstick on a pig, or, it's the idea we hear about it some today with the terms of behavior modification. It's like nothing really's changed, but I've changed the external behavior. Sometimes even the phrase like fake it till you make it. It's like, well, I'm not really there yet, but I'm just going to sort of like pretend that I am and try to act out like I am. And so we can be inclined towards that, because where we notice the behavior is in the body. That's where we see it, because that's when it becomes a reality, and we go, whoa, like, why did I just say that way? That was not a good thing to say. Or, wow, I didn't really like how I acted. Or, man, like, I wish I'd showed up differently with that person. And so that's where we notice it. And when we notice it there, what we often want to do is then sort of try to like address it or attack it or fix it there. And we say, oh my goodness, let me change my behavior. Well, that's not really going to work. Not long term. I mean, we can try. I have done a lot of that in my life, where you try to change the behavior. It's exhausting, for one, but it just doesn't work, because we come back into another situation down the road and we're trying so hard to show up in that new way that we want to. And then we were like, why is this so hard? I'm wanting to do this. Well, we have to go backwards. If we look back at this slide, we have to go against that arrow if we really want behavior to change, and say, wait a second here. What's going on in my will? What's going on in that library of beliefs that I have inside of me? Some of us today with technology, we might think about like, what's in the data warehouse? What's stored inside the data part of me that's actually informing these particular decisions. And, as I was prepping for this, I was thinking about a couple of scriptures that are really enlightening when we think about this particular arrow and changing our behavior and changing our heart. One of them comes out of Proverbs, and it's Proverbs 4:23. And we hear these words and just let them kind of soak in light of what we're talking about. Above all else. That's kind of like an important statement. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And I love the Bible, because it's just, like, everything is so incredibly, as I kid with a friend of mine, it's loaded. And, we listen to just this one statement, and there's a lot in there. Above all else, that's a pretty significant statement. Guard your heart, for everything. That's pretty all-encompassing. That doesn't leave anything out. Everything you do, there's our action and our behavior, everything you do flows from it. Another scripture, these are the words of Jesus out of Matthew 12:35. And hear what he says about this. And there's a lot in the scriptures about the heart. These are just a few that are good to consider with what we're talking about. And Jesus says, a good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart. So notice that idea of that library, the library of beliefs, our library of decisions that we've made. And Jesus is saying a good person produces, so here's our behavior, good things from the treasury of a good heart. And an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. So there's that library again. It's filled with, we can imagine it being negative decisions, negative beliefs, and out of that treasury of negative beliefs, we're going to produce evil things out of our heart. And when we are in real life, wanting to then change our behavior, change how we show up, like we talked about last time, our patterns, our habits, we want those to be different. We want to learn in our development journey, if I don't like some of the behavior, I don't need to try to attack it at a behavior place. I need to be informed with the wisdom of Jesus and the wisdom out of Proverbs, and I need to realize where I need to go is actually back to the heart. I need to go back in there and I need to take a look at what's going on. And, in real life, like that's easy to say. We can look at this particular slide and we can think, well, that's really not that hard. Like that's simple enough, right? But in real life, what makes it complicated is it can feel really foggy or like muddy, to get clear about what's in the heart. And why is that? We look at the behavior, we go, I want to fix the behavior, we go back to the heart, and we think, well, let me just change the belief. But part of what makes that challenging is, you remember last time we were talking about the heart, we talked about that idea of that all of our beliefs are wrapped in emotion. So we use this example of a shoe, that the belief is that foot inside of the shoe, but then what's around those beliefs is the idea of emotion. And so when we go into what we believe, we need to have that wisdom with us. We need to go back and we need to realize what we're going to first encounter as we re-enter that heart space to learn, like, what do I think and what do I believe? What we're going to first encounter there is a lot of emotion. And if we don't have wisdom to realize emotion is wrapping around the belief, we're going to sort of get like distracted with all the fogginess and the muddiness of the emotion. We have to lean into that, stick with it. And we have to say, yes, but like, what am I believing inside of that particular emotion that may be driving this particular behavior? I want to share a story because I think, stories are just fun and it might help with this. So I remember noticing a number of years ago that I really had a bad habit, so behavior, a bad habit of wanting to correct people and correct them when they would say things that weren't accurate. Now, I didn't always do it. Sometimes I had the nice fake it till you make it thing going, and I would not necessarily do it, but internally it was like, like they just said something wrong and I kind of want to correct. They said the wrong thing. Or maybe like controlling. It's like I wanted to sort of steer and control maybe a conversation or a situation. And it took me a while to notice that pattern, but eventually it's like, wait a second, like, what is that about? Why are you being so like controlling and correcting? And, and it was kind of lipstick on a pig, sort of nice. Sometimes it just wouldn't, I don't know that people around me would notice it, but I knew, underneath, I knew, like, if I wasn't worried about being nice and people liking me right now and looking nice, like I would just sort of control the situation and change it. And so I went back, and prayed about it. I this is that whole invite the Holy Spirit in. And I just said, Father, I really want to understand, what is this about? Like, why am I being controlling? Why do I want to correct people? Why, even if I don't do it, why is that what's showing up for me? And I'm feeling frustrated and tense in my body about things. And as I started to do that, I encountered a lot of emotion. Part of it was I'm angry and I'm frustrated and I don't like it when people say the wrong thing. And it's irritating to me that, they won't say the right thing, because if we had the right information, we could do the right thing. And as I just sort of was in that place, because it's triggering. I mean, we encounter that wall of emotion and we just sort of want to hightail it back out of there and be like, yeah, never mind. Not that big of a deal. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I'll just try harder, do better. But when we really want change, we have to stick with it. We keep praying, we keep pressing in. And what I found was underneath all of that emotion was actually a belief. Took a little while to become aware of it, but was actually this belief of, if I don't control it, and if I don't try to correct and change it, then something bad might happen. And there was also another belief, like a twin belief right there with it, of I'm the one who knows what's right and what needs to actually happen. And if I'm in control and I make sure the information's right, then I'm going to make sure that what happens is good and is right. And being someone who has spent quite a bit of time in the Bible, once I could see that belief, it's like, whoa, 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 wait a minute here. That's not the full truth. There's a word I like. It's a fake word, but I like it because it just sort of drives home the point. What's truer? What's truer? And so there was a component of what I was believing that was maybe partially true. At times, I can help drive things in a good direction. Good things will happen. But there was also a part of it that wasn't true. And a lot of times we'll find our beliefs are a blend of what's true and what isn't true. And what I needed to do was stick with that and continue to pray into it to realize there's a false piece of this as well. Like somehow, and I'll just be blunt about it because sometimes blunt makes it more clear. Like I'm God's gift to the world. I'm God's gift to the world. And if I'm out there doing like the things I'm supposed to be doing and I'm making things correct and I'm making it right, then everything's going to go right from here forward. And that was that belief. And as I dug more into it, I began to realize that actually had formed out of some painful things that I had walked through earlier in life. That had become a belief because I'd had some things that had happened that weren't good. And I had formed this belief that if I had been in charge and I would have done the right thing and I would have made sure the right thing happened, and then that wouldn't have happened. And it was a protective way of dealing with the thing. But what that had done is it had grown inside of my heart. And I had developed this belief of, then I just need to be in control and I just need to be the one that corrects. And then that way everything's going to be good for me. I'll be safe and it's going to be good for the people around me. They'll be safe. And I was walking with that. Well, no wonder the behavior couldn't change. No wonder it was really hard for me to not be controlling and to not want to change and correct what was happening in situations. It was coming out of a belief. So as the information was then replaced with our fake word, that's a good word, what was truer, what was more holistically true and accurate, I actually began to see it wasn't nearly so challenging to not need to correct, to not need to control. And it's still an area, I want to be honest on the podcast, it's still an area that I'm growing in because it just was such a habitual behavior and belief for so long that I still notice it, like trace elements of it here and there. And I'm like, whoa, there's that thing again. But I can go then against that arrow back up to the heart and I can meditate again on what's truer, what's more holistically true. And it really helps me go from triggered to calm very quickly. It's not nearly so challenging. And I also notice it just doesn't show up that much. Things that would have really been hard for me before and triggered me, and I would have just been doing everything I could to not do the behavior I didn't want to do. Now it's like I can be in situations like that and it's not as hard. It's not nearly so hard. And so I share all of that because we want to now get practical with how do we apply this understanding and this learning. And there's a couple things we want to do this week. So we want to look back at our slide here and we want to think about, okay, there are times that I, this week, am going to pick and decide new things. And then we just want to observe that flow from that picking and deciding into our behavior. We just want to look for that this week. And again, like we talked about last time, get the feel of that. Like, oh yeah, I made this decision and then look what I did with it. And oh, I made this decision and then look what I did with it. It's very rare that we'll make a decision, our will is engaged, we've decided, we've picked something, we've maybe even made it a belief that we won't go act on it. We're going to act on what we believe to be true. That's going to happen most of the time, even if it's hidden. I want to highlight that because sometimes we can tend to think, well, if I don't actually carry it out, if it's a negative thing, I'm not doing it. I tried to cheat that way for a long time and it's just not true. We want to kind of look and be like, even if I don't do it, am I still wanting to do it? Do I still feel that way? Is that really what I'm kind of desiring to do? We want to notice that, But we want to look at that this week. So kind of back to the point here. We want to see, okay, how do the things that I pick and decide, how do they then get carried out in my body? Or I want to carry them out, but I don't act on them, because that's still like desired behavior. We're going to feel it physically in our body. And then the other thing we want to do this week is look for, and it might be something one time this week. It might be something, maybe it's one thing a day, just depends on how much time you have. And, just really kind of what this is doing for you as you're listening to this today. If it's really kind of pulling on you and you're like, I really need to think about that. I want to encourage you to pick something that you dissect this week. And so what does that mean, dissect? That you notice the behavior in your life, something that you say or something that you do, and you go against the grain of that arrow, because that's that habit. We're just going to go do it, but we go against the grain of that arrow and we go back to the heart and we sort of like go through all the fog of the emotion and we really work to get to what's maybe that belief. What's that belief that's potentially driving that for me, and where did it come from? And just a really practical thing here. When you do that, don't be nasty to yourself. Just don't. That's going to trigger you. Don't be judgmental. Don't be all wagging your finger in your face, so to speak. Just explore. Just be curious. Just let yourself wonder about it and work through the feelings. You may want to journal it out. That can help a lot, just to say, well, what are all the feelings that are showing up? Kind of find a place to let those be somewhere. And then go through that deeper and invite, like I say, every time, invite God's help, because he can create illumination for us way faster than we can. So if you really kind of want to know, God, help me understand the belief behind this particular action, ask him to show that to you. I've been amazed. I used to try to do a lot in my own strength, and I've just been amazed now. If I will go back and do that and just ask him, Father, help me understand. Like, I want your Holy Spirit to help me understand what's driving this. And sometimes I'll be doing something like, 5-6 hours later, I'm in the middle of my day, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, it's just there. It's just this it's there. And I realize, oh, that's why. That's where that's coming from. So don't be yucky. Don't be nasty to yourself. Just explore and be curious. And then when that becomes more clear for you, you may want to even look in the Bible for a scripture that would help you identify what's truer, or you may want to talk to somebody who is a safe and a trusted friend. It might be a counselor, it might be a mentor, it might really just be a good friend, might be somebody at church. But that can also be a good way to explore it, just to say, I was thinking about this thing that I do, this thing. And if they know you well, they're probably like, yeah, I know the thing. But they won't harass you with it. If they're a good friend, they're just gonna be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then you may want to say, I'm noticing this thing that maybe it's coming from. Can you help me unpack that? Can you maybe pray with me? Could you help me even identify what's truer than what I'm believing right now? And so I want to encourage that. Sometimes even finding music, that really reinforces another kind of thought, that truer thought. Sometimes just listening to that, listening to maybe even one song a bunch of times can really begin to help us lock more onto what's truer in that heart. And then what we're going to see is the behavior then begins to change and flow out of us differently. And it's not going to take a ton of effort. That's often a sign of something isn't really solidified in the heart that needs to be yet. Something isn't held on to. That truer thing doesn't feel real enough to me yet. And that's part of why this behavior is still challenging. So that's our practical steps for this week. Pull out your journals, write some things down. Doesn't have to be complicated. But you may just want to, even like if it's a little sticky note, like, here's some things that are showing up for me. Just don't overcomplicate it, but explore, see what comes out, learn like the pattern of that arrow. Like, when do I just let that happen and know that behavior is going to follow belief and I go with it? And when do I need to go against that arrow and actually explore the heart so that what's coming out of my behavior is different. So hope you all have a fantastic week and look forward to being back with you next time.